The EU always had interest in the MENA region, from politics to economy and trade, arriving to cultural ties and relations. EU Arabic spokesperson for the MENA region, Luis Miguel Bueno, is with us today to tackle all of these topics and more.
Luis, welcome to MENA on the Map. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Great to have been here.
Luis, I would like to start to talk about your interest in the MENA region. I was reading about your diplomatic career, and as an experienced diplomat, you focused on the Arab Islamic world. You're very much knowledgeable about conflict dynamics, especially in Sudan, in the Middle East as a whole, in Yemen, but also in the Balkans. I'm interested to know what interested you in our region, in the MENA region.
Okay, I'll begin with a story. Let's say a personal story, and the personal story goes back to when I was like a child, let's say 5 or 6. I clearly remember this, believe it or not. But my grandpa, I'm from Cordoba in southern Spain, and my grandpa used to take me to the big mosque that is in Cordoba, the Umayyad mosque that was built in the 8th century, right? And so I would go there pretty much every day. There is a nice patio inside and so on. And then I was fascinated by these inscriptions on the walls, like these weird letters, Later on, I found out, of course, that they were Arabic letters, and in particular, verses from the Quran, that the Umayyads had. Of course, it was a mosque back then. And in the mirhab, in the wall, there were golden letters there that were beautiful. And I was thinking to myself, I need to learn this language somehow. It's so strange, so fascinating. So I began, little by little getting interested about our neighbors, in fact, because, when you look at the map, you see that we're very much connected to the Swedes, but we have in my own country about a few kilometers separation with the Arab world, right? And I felt somehow that we have been, at least from my personal experience, a bit disconnected. So I began, getting to know a bit more about it. And I told myself, I need to learn this language when I have a chance, and I need to know more about the culture and the people, which I did. What I'm doing, in fact, I'm still learning, and I'm still learning about the language, the culture, and the people. So here I am, a few years later, as a spokesperson of the EU in Arabic, in fact, in this region. This is the anecdotal story that I can tell you, but from a professional perspective, in my own career, I thought that it'll be nice to let's say put this in perspective somehow, or translate these childhood dreams into something that I could use. And the second anecdote is that when I was studying law at university, I had a teacher who was as bored as we were. He didn't really want to teach us much about, canonical law, imagine that. And so he decided to teach us something else, like intercultural dialogue, cultural relations, and so on. And one of the things that he told me was, if you want to really serve the public and learn, why don't you become a diplomat? And I said, why not? And so I combined both things. And here I am.
We're glad to have you in the region.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Luis, let me welcome you in my turn as well. I'm so happy to see you on MENA on the Map. If we look at things from a geopolitical perspective, as you were just mentioning in your answer, Europe became a neighboring country with Middle Eastern countries, having Greece and Cyprus next to our borders, for example, in Lebanon, Syria, and even here in Jordan. We are neighbors with the EU, if we can put it this way. So what can you tell us about this neighborhood? Are we in good terms? And how the EU tries to tackle issues like cultural relations, trade, political issues, and maybe conflicts as well?
Yeah, no, thank you, Philip, for welcoming me, and glad to be here again. Of course, the neighborhood. This is something that the European Union itself has been grappling with for years now. Let me go back quickly to, for example, the Barcelona process, what was called the Barcelona process, 1995. You have the Berlin Wall falling, you have the end of the Cold War happening, and you have a realization that Europe wants to somehow project its, we always talk about soft power, towards its neighborhood in the south by building a new partnership, let's say. And there you have all leaders of the European Union gathering and launching what we call the Barcelona process in 1995, so a while ago. A lot has happened ever since. And what has happened essentially from a policy perspective is that we've reviewed in the European Union our relations with this neighborhood, what we call it the Southern neighborhood. Several times. It happened right after the Arab Spring. It happened years after the Arab Spring in 2015. And I was personally involved in this review when I was working in Brussels. And I added my humble grain of sand to what we were doing back then with Algeria. In fact, I was Algeria desk. And in essence, this relationship is a dense relationship. It covers many of the areas you've just mentioned, Philip. It covers culture, but of course it covers trade, it covers investment, it covers political dialogue, human rights, democracy. In fact, it somehow copies what the European Union was trying to do with what we call candidate countries, right? You have the Balkans, or you have, if you remember, in 2004, we had the latest big, let's say, expansion boom, or that the European Union undertook towards the East, right? 10 member states became member states, 10 member candidates or candidate countries became member states. And the policy that the European Union applies to this neighborhood, to the South neighborhood, it somehow imitates what we've been doing for years with candidate countries in terms of building this partnership along several lines that are related to the values that we share, and also, you know, a series of common challenges that we face. And here I'd like to emphasize this point, because we're talking about a region. You said at the beginning, do we have a good relationship or not, a good neighborhood relationship or not? I think we do, but I think we also have among neighbors the duty and the obligation to be honest with each other, right? And so this relationship is made up of also a good degree of honesty, in fact, you know, and that means that we also discuss problems. We also discuss with our partners in the region issues of common concern and things that we believe in the European Union are of interest to both. We can start. I don't want to be long because I'm sure you have other questions, but let me just be short here by saying that there are two areas here. One is the neighborhood south, the region we're in now. You're in Jordan, I'm in Lebanon. Jordan and Lebanon are countries that are part of what we call the European neighborhood policy. We have a dense structure of agreements, association agreements, legal, institutional agreements, and so on. And through that, we provide assistance, but also we exchange good practices, because we also learn. It's not about a one-way relationship. We also learn from our partners in the region, and we want it to be a dialogue that is tailor-made. Each country is different, right? Egypt is different from Morocco, and Morocco is different from Jordan, and so on. Then we have the region of the Gulf. It's a bit far away. It's a bit out of the traditional neighborhood of the European Union. And there we are witnessing something that is new, in fact. The European Union in the past few years has been building a country-by-country relationship with these countries, with our partners in that region. We still have a relationship with the Gulf Cooperation Council, but for instance, now with Saudi Arabia, we have a dialogue. We have let's say, a political dialogue on a bilateral basis. We also have that with the Emirates. We have that with Iraq. So this is a new development. It's never, let's say, it was not developed before because it was a sister-to-sister organization relationship between the EU and the GCC. But now we're trying to do this on an individual country basis. And so, in short, Philip, to answer your question, the relationship we believe is good, but not only good, it's essential, because you want to get along with your neighbor, right? You want to have, you want to share with your neighbor what interests you, to make your neighbor better, to make yourself better, in a way, and also to confront, as we said, common challenges. And the main one now, for instance, is the pandemic. We have seen examples of this is affected countries like Jordan. You're in Jordan now. Jordan has lost a lot of its income, tourism income, in the past year and a half. And with our Jordanian partners, we're trying to assess what is needed. We have a great, let's say, array of programs with them to support the Jordanian administration, but also civil society to move forward. And so this is the spirit of partnership.
Luis, on this level, the issue remains how to have a concrete dialogue between both regions, because the EU has a unified foreign policy to a certain extent. However, in the MENA region, every country is unique, as you mentioned. But I would like to move with you now to the issue of refugees and the EU policy towards refugees in the MENA region, specifically Syrian refugees, who are in the region but at the same time who are accepted in Europe. Are there any plans for safe return of Syrian refugees to their countries, or solutions are basically far-fetched, especially after the re-election of Bashar al-Assad in Syria?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's clear that this is a crucial issue for the European Union in the region, no doubt. We've witnessed what we've witnessed in the past few years, especially in 2015-16, what we call the migration or refugee crisis in Europe. It's affected also domestically the European Union to a great extent, as you've seen. And the steps that the European Union is taking are clear. We've become the largest donor to refugees in the region. We've held the 5th Syria conference in Brussels this year. Mostly, unfortunately, it was mostly virtual, but also physical to a great extent with partners in the region and also international organizations. And we've mobilized so far, since the beginning of the Syrian crisis, about 25 billion euros in terms of assistance, not only in Syria, of course, but also in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and countries of the region, right? So this assistance will continue, no doubt, and we will continue mobilizing funds and mobilizing our partners to shoulder this effort. When it comes to why the refugees are there, of course, you just mentioned it. We're not talking about a natural disaster, a tsunami or an earthquake. We're talking about a crisis that is being, politically motivated, right? It's a war, and people have fled a war. And it has to be very clear. We cannot criminalize refugees. I mean, you may hear this from some political quarters, that migration is a threat, or even refugees may be a threat. On the contrary, there is an international obligation to protect refugees. The European Union is doing its duty in this regard. We do what we can to help countries in the region that are shouldering, and for example, Lebanon and Jordan are at the forefront of this, Turkey as well. In fact, Turkey, I think, is the country that hosts the largest amount of refugees in the world, 3 million and something, but Lebanon, if we compare per capita, is probably the first of the list. Jordan is also very much there. So what we need in Syria is now, we always say the same thing: the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2254, the Geneva Communique from 2012 is still relevant. The elections that just took place, unfortunately, do not respect the international standards that we cherish in the European Union and that we promote, and therefore we don't recognize the validity of these elections. What we need is a resumption of the political discussions with the Syrian regime and with the Syrian opposition, including out of Syria. And it is not for us to judge what the future of Syria may be. That's for Syrians to decide. But when it comes to the return, and you mentioned this question, it's important to stress this. We in the European Union rely very much on the assessment that the UN is doing, and in particular the agency in charge of refugees, right? UNHCR. And so far, what UNHCR and other partners as well on the ground have been telling us is that a return to Syria is unsafe. And in fact, we've seen that some of the refugees that have made it back have been confronted with a series of, security threats. Some of them have been recruited into the Syrian army. Some of them have been taken, by the regime, and they disappeared. This issue is quite telling. When it comes to deciding whether or not refugees have the right to return. We're not against that right, but we're just saying that this return needs to be on a voluntary basis. It needs to be done in safely and also with dignity. You cannot just send people back to a country that is completely destroyed, where there's no security, no public services, no nothing, right?
Excellent. But as a counter example to what the UNHCR are saying, we have witnessed in the past elections in Beirut, thousands of Syrian refugees voted for Bashar al-Assad. Don't you think these can be accepted in their home country?
I mean, I think there may be several reasons why Syrian refugees in Lebanon voted for Bashar al-Assad. It may have to do with the fact that if they do not do so, they may not be accepted back. You may have to go to the border and be confronted with a security guard, and if you don't show the paper that proves that you voted, you may not be allowed in, or worse. So of course there's an element of that, of coercion, right? I understand also the position of Lebanese parties or Lebanese NGOs and the Lebanese public in general, saying, look, we're going through a massive crisis. We are suffering ourselves. We've seen the data, right? More than 60% of the Lebanese population is under the poverty line now. It's a massive disaster. We've never seen something like that in this country. And yet we also have to help Syrian refugees, right? I understand that. But again, I think the international community has a responsibility to help countries like Lebanon or Jordan or Turkey to assume their obligations also, legal obligations to, let's say, protect these people who are fleeing war. And therefore, again, the European Union will be there to provide support, and we're already doing it, very much so. But I'm sure there'll be soon enough another package to be announced in this regard by the European Commission.
Luis, you will be celebrating soon your first year as EU Arabic Spokesperson in MENA. You are established in Beirut, and that is unfortunately witnessing now one of the toughest periods in Lebanon's history on all levels. How are you living these circumstances, from the oil and fuel crisis to electricity to power cuts?
Yes.
You are now, as a Lebanese citizen, you're witnessing all the suffering. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
I mean, I was appointed to this post recently, and I started in end of January. And we arrived, me and my family, to Lebanon in November. And to be honest with you, Philip, we were very thrilled to come, because we've been in Brussels for a long time. We're thinking, I lived in the Middle East before, and I wanted to return. And I was excited, about being in Lebanon. And Lebanon is such a beautiful country, has so many attractions, of course. Now, yes, we are in the midst of a crisis, and I am suffering its consequences as well. I was queuing for 2 hours the other day in front of a gas station. We're finding our ways around it. My children, we are in massive traffic jams to take them to school, but we are at the same time very privileged because, of course, we're not, let's say, directly affected as Lebanese are. I can only empathize with those who have been, let's say, suffering the consequences of this. And we're witnessing now shortages of not only electricity, but also water and so on. And in that regard, it's a shame because the country is, I wouldn't say beautiful, more than that. We've been touring the country here and there. We've been visiting north and south as much as we could because there were lockdowns too because of COVID. And to be honest, we want to stay as much as we can. We love Lebanon, and we love Lebanese people because I personally been approached more than once by people, Lebanese, who were here to thank me for being here. They were asking me. I remember in Batum once, we went there to a restaurant, and this lady was hearing me speaking Spanish, and she approached me and said, "Sir, I wanted to thank you." I said, "Why?" "Why? Because you're here." I said, "Okay, thank you." "I don't know. No, I thank you." And so she was very nice, saying, "Where are you from?" So it was not the first time. It's happened to me many times, and the welcoming of the Lebanese has been such that I'm, my neighbors here, they've invited me so many times, despite Corona. So we're talking about, a country that is in dire straits, but at the same time of people who are so lovely and so welcoming with foreigners that really, we're looking forward to staying, and hopefully the situation will better soon.
Thank you.
Luis, I would like to go back to the issue of partnership. You mentioned something very important about the EU-MENA partnership and the importance of exchange. As a woman, I'm interested to know, how do you evaluate the participation of women in politics in the MENA, and how the EU is being able to support women to engage more actively in politics and in decision making?
Yes, well, according to, if my data is right, according to the ILO, I think the MENA region has the lowest participation of women in the world, in the world market. It doesn't, I think the average is 43%, but to be checked. And the MENA region is about 18%, something like that, very low. So indeed, this is a major issue. You know, I don't especially like the empowerment of women phrase. What I like is the idea behind it, because what we need to do is to make sure that half of our society, be it in Europe or in the Middle East region, is able to work and to, let's say, provide for their families and to, and we've come a long way in Europe in this regard. I mean, my own country in Spain, 50 years ago, women were not allowed to buy a car independently. They're not allowed to travel, in fact, without the authorization of their husbands. 50 years ago, I'm talking. My mom remembers this. She was telling me the other day, about this, when she was young and how things were in Spain. It depends on the country. In the MENA region, you have countries that have taken, look at the Emirates. In the Emirates, you have quite a lot of progress in terms of women in politics, the ability to participate in socio-economic activities. In other countries, it's less. And what we're trying to do, we have something called the Gender Action Plan that we adopted for the third time, in fact, it's third edition of this plan. And within this plan, we are funding activities in the MENA region that are both of regional nature, but also bilateral nature. We have a program, for instance, that is specially dedicated to fighting gender-based violence. And this is a major issue here. Through workshops, trainings, we also give grants to women entrepreneurs. I was very impressed, for instance, by one lady in Yemen who was trained by the European Union and became let's say, a moderator or a negotiator in Hodeidah, one of the main port cities in the country. She was mediating, she was a mediator. She was trained as a mediator between the two sides, right? And she was part of what we call the stabilization efforts that the EU is funding in that country. And this lady was just simply amazing. She was going from one community to the other, talking to elders, talking to shuyukh and sheikh and this and that. And she did manage to get, for instance, to open corridors for humanitarian aid, to convince families to move from one place to the other. These are the ladies, these are heroes, And these ladies, I'm not saying this because I work for the EU and the EU is training these days or funding the projects. Yeah. I'm saying that there are many examples of this. You also have that in the Maghreb, ladies who are contributing to the socioeconomic level of the countries to their own projects. And this issue, in my view, is something that we need to insist more on. We do have programs. We do have the Gender Action Plan and our regional and bilateral programs in every country. But I think it has to be a major strategic priority for us in this region, right?
Yeah.
Luis, before closing with you, I would like you to, since you are the EU spokesperson in Arabic, to close in Arabic and tell us about your experience in digital diplomacy and getting along with people on Twitter and social media in Arabic. So ما هي حسنات أو سيئات التواصل الاجتماعي في عالم الدبلوماسية الإلكترونية؟
طيب، اللغة العربية هذا موضوع صعب للغاية. الكلام أو أتحدث عن الموضوع باللغة العربية الدبلوماسية الرقمية كما نسميها صعب. لكن أحسن، هناك إيجابيات وهناك أيضا بصراحة البعض السيء ممكن نسميه الانخراط الدبلوماسي في هذا العالم أو كوكب الرقمي. وشهدنا تغيرات كبيرة في السنوات الماضية في مجال الدبلوماسية، وبما في ذلك مثلا في أوروبا تم اعتماد استراتيجية جديدة رقمية. دنمارك لأول مرة في تاريخها مؤخرا مثلا، وهذه الاستراتيجية جديدة خالص، وتشمل بعض الأدوات اللي نستخدمها نحن كدبلوماسيين منذ سنوات، لكن في الكوكب الرقمي. والمطلوب والمفروض الآن ليس فقط من المارك يعني، وانما من الاتحاد الاوروبي كتكاتل، هو انه يعني معالجه او معالجه التحديات اللي نواجهها الان في هذا المجال. ومثلا هناك الان يعني التحدي الكبير اللي لدينا الان هي التصرف احيانا للمنصات الكبيره مثل جوجل وفيسبوك الى اخره فيما يتعلق بالبيرسونال داتا، البيانات الشخصيه. فاصبحت بالفعل اولويه استراتيجيه للاتحاد الاوروبي حمايه هذه البيانات الشخصيه داخل الاتحاد وخارج الاتحاد، حتى لانه نحن المعايير الدوليه والمعايير الاوروبيه تطبق احيانا في بلدان اخرى. فهذه هي يعني هذا بنسميه السوفت باور احيانا، يعني القدره للاتحاد الاوروبي لتعزيز هذه المعايير الاوروبيه خارج الاتحاد بما يخص مثلا هذه الحمايه للبيانات الشخصيه، وايضا الستاندرد سيتنج بنسميه بالانجليزي، رايت؟ لكن موجود على تويتر، وانا موجود على تويتر منذ شهور كما تعلم، وشكرا على فكره فيليب على التدريب اللي تلقيت منك. نعم، هذا يعني انا شخصيا يعني ما ليس لدي من خبره في هذا المجال، فانا اول مره في حياتي انه اجرب هذه الخبره، لكن انا اجد بانها مفيده صراحه، لانه استطيع انا شخصيا انقل بعض الرسائل ليس فقط مثلا للمنظمات الدوليه والحكومات، وانما ايضا للمواطنين العاديين الموجودين على تويتر. فصار في اكثر من مره مثلا انا شاهدت كثير من الانجيجمنت من تغريداتي حول مواضيع مثلا السياسيه خاصه، خلينا نقول صريحين، اكثر من المشاريع والى اخره. ولكن انا بشعر بان الاكسس او المعلومه والرسائل اللي انقلها فعلا تصل للناس. فهذه هي بالنسبه لي ايجابيه، يعني واحد من الايجابيات. I tried my best.
Excellent.
That was great. Thank you so much. On a final note, we thank you so much for joining MENA on the map.
Thank you, Luis, and we see you in Beirut.
See you in Beirut, and also Yara, see you in Beirut if you are around. And thank you so much for inviting me to your program. All the best and all the luck to you.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.